Hey y'all, it's Billy Hale, and I have quite a video for you today. It seemed so simple when I started. I ordered interior for a wallet from my favorite company, Springfield Leather. And I get a lot of emails from YouTube and Facebook, and people say, "Hey Jim, how'd you make that wallet?" So I thought, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to actually get the camera going, and I'm going to show you how the interiors work, the leather you're going to need for the outside. Then I thought, well, if I'm going to make a wallet, I'm going to tool it, right? So then I go through the tooling process. I try not to bore you with too much information, but when I go that route, people are like, we need more information. So I tried to give just the right amount of information. Then I had a tooling or a dye idea that I wanted to try on this, and I show you how to antique, how to dye this black, and then how to clear coat it for daily use. And I talk about hand stitching, which I don't do anymore thanks to my trusty sewing machine behind my shoulder. And then I show you me sewing it on the machine to a final process. So the video may end up being in multiple stages depending on what I get away with time-wise. But it is a very comprehensive tutorial on how to just make a wallet. But of course, everything we do with this wallet would lend itself to holsters and belts and all kinds of things. So when I'm done, hopefully you'll have a piece or a video that you'll be able to reference for many things. So without further ado, let's jump right into the kit, the roper kit from Springfield Leather, and I'll start building. So today we're talking about the Springfield Leather Roper Unpunched Wallet Interior. I have a lot to say about this. So if you're interested in creating a wallet and maybe you need some guidance, you're at the right place. Let's get started. First of all, let's talk about what you get. We'll slide this up. We're going to talk about what is in this paperwork in just a second. But when you purchase this, you're going to get nicely finished interiors for a wallet. One thing to note is you'll see the stitching on one side, but not the other. That's because you will be stitching your wallet on the unstitched side. So something to be aware of. And then we have these two pieces that go on the other side of your wallet. So you'll have a little place to put maybe money here, and then you'll actually have another place down here underneath this. And it's all pre-sewn. It's very nicely done. I will say that I have purchased kits from other companies, multiple companies, and the last thing you want to do is spend a lot of time and money. You're going to cut leather, you're going to tool leather, you're going to stitch leather, especially if you're hand stitching, you're really going to stitch a lot of leather. And then you realize that the interior was not that great. Then you don't feel good about selling it or carrying it or showing it to people, and you don't want that. And that is why I'm sitting here talking to you about this. I bought this with my own money. I'm not sponsored by Springfield, although I am a huge fan. I love their video channel. So I'm going to tell you things you need to know if you're going to take this on. So the next question you're going to have is, Jim, what do I sew this to? Well, it doesn't come with a piece of leather that you need to sew it to, but when you put this in your shopping cart on Springfield, it should come up with a piece of leather that is the perfect size for this. I believe it's around $9. Don't quote me, but it's not bad, and it's a great way to go. Just don't mess up. So if you buy that one piece of leather and then you mess up, you're a little bit out of luck. That's why I buy rolls of Hermit Oak from Springfield, and it's not that expensive, especially if you catch it on a sale. And leather prices have, as of today, gone down a little bit. So that's great for you and your tooling expeditions. And so inside, let's talk about that. They have punched versions of this. So if you don't want to hand sew, and hand sewing, I will have a link in the description that shows how to hand sew this, and I'll probably touch on it when we get there. It's great, and it lasts a long time, and it's quality work. It just is hard work, and it takes a long time. Also, you can whip stitch or buck stitch or whatever you want to call it, and they send in some information on how to do that yourself. I've done this on, I guess, a wallet, and so that's in there. But the thing you really want to pay attention to are the instructions on how to put your wallet together. And so it's going to show you the placement. They are going to advise you to use basting tape. I've never used basting tape. I have glue, and I don't use a lot of glue, but I use a little bit of glue and glue everything in, and then I sew it that way. It's going to explain how everything's going to live on the piece of leather that you cut, and that's all right here. And this is your leather that you don't have yet. So let's move on to that. These guys, and this is kind of an example of one of the one of the wallets. And so you're going to have this outline right here. You're going to receive that in the package, and you're going to want to trace that. So let's talk, well, you know what? Yes. You definitely want tracing paper. Now, you don't have to have it right now, but if you're going to be serious about tooling leather and making things, you're going to need the tracing paper, and you're going to want to trace this. Now, I have a little issue here. I don't want to do this pattern because I have an aversion to acorns. I believe it goes back to an incident as a small child. I don't know why, but I don't do acorns on leather ever. So I'm not going to use this. So what do you do then when you have this? What I did is I put it in the printer and I scanned it. And then I went into Photoshop. And I have to admit that I do use Photoshop quite a bit in the stuff that I do. And I have purchased floral designs. It's kind of a weird hobby, I guess, in PDF formats. And then what I do is I go snip them and I'll drop them in on holsters. I'll show you one right here that I was working on. This is actually something I designed. But I took this piece and dropped it in on this holster. And so that'll go on a 1911 holster. And that all started as an image. So you go in there, you drop it in, you make it fit. I've left room on the edges for my stitches. You definitely don't want to crowd yourself, and I am definitely crowding myself, but that's because I like to live on the edge. And here's a gigantic thing I have to tell you. When you scan this on your printer, and then you go and you print it, you want to really make sure it's exactly the same size as the original. Because I have scanned it, printed it, cut it, tooled it, only to realize it didn't fit anything. There it is right there. In fact, I can't believe it's still here, but yes, that's a piece that fits nothing. And well, I got another one here that does the same thing too. So really, I didn't learn my lesson the first, second, or probably the third time. This is a really nice piece, actually. It just doesn't fit anything, and that could happen to you. So don't let it happen. So I made sure that this reprint was exactly the same size. And so what's going to happen now is this is the piece that I printed. Well, this is actually the original. This is a double way to make sure you're cutting your leather the right size. I'm going to go in and trace these outlines. In my ruler, I almost said handy dandy, which I guess would be a reference. But my ruler I will use for the straight lines just to make sure I stay straight. And then I will not do any of this internal acorn-esque tooling pattern that I don't like. Then I will slide this underneath what I've already traced, tape it back on, and then I'll draw the outlines of this, and then I'll tool it. So that's kind of a getting going on the wallet, things you need to know, tricks and tips. And so what's going to happen next is I'm just going to take a pencil and I'm going to trace this all out. And the other reason you want this kind of tracing paper is because it's plasticky and not papery. Tracing paper will only last you a couple of tries and then you're out of luck. I'll use this until I'm probably, 70. I don't know. So, good stuff to have. Alright, I'm going to sit down now and trace this out and trace this out, and when we come back I'll have all that done, and then we'll talk about cutting our leather out and what I use to do all that. Okay, so I've traced the outline and now I'm tracing the actual floral design, and one thing I am turning the camera on to say to you is, when you trace this outline, you might think, I don't have to be exactly right. I'll get it right on the leather. And I have to tell you from doing this over and over and over again, this outline has to be perfect. Because the more deviation from the outline, it's just going to get worse and worse with every iteration. So when you trace it onto your leather, then it's not going to be right, exactly right. Your curves won't be curved right. They're going to look slightly wonky. And then when you go and cutting with the blade, you definitely can at that point stay smooth because you're cutting into a piece of leather. So it tends to want to follow a line, but you have to follow the right line. So all I'm saying here is be very precise, especially if you think you're going to do this thing more than a few times. If you think I'm going to make this wallet 28 times in the next year or something like that, this is very important. And the more you use your stylus on this, it's going to make indentations in this thing, and it'll allow you to trace it even easier each time that you do it. It'll create dents in this vellum or whatever you want to call it. And then one more thing I'll say while I'm thinking about it. When you cut the tracing paper, you want to cut it as close, not too close, because you got to tape this to your leather. Don't try this without taping to your leather. I've done that too, and guess what you get? You get a piece you can't use, and now you've just wasted like $30 worth of leather. So what you want is an edge that's far enough away to put some tape on to your leather, and we'll look at that when we get there, but not so big that you're wasting leather. So like if I have this taped to a piece of leather like this, I'm using the least tacky tape, here it is, that I can. And this stuff is Easy Mask Clean Edge, and it's the least tack I can find. It still will take, you can see it on this piece of leather, well maybe you can or you cannot, but you can get it in the camera. It will take the top surface off the leather. You can see right here where I put a piece of tape and it's taken that surface off. And you might be able to get that to look normal again on some other piece, but you probably won't, because this will always live on this piece of leather. So when you tape something to a piece of leather and then you cut it, which is exactly what happened here, and then here's where the tape was, you can't really use that anymore. So my goal is to waste as little leather as I can. This is a great piece of leather. I just have to use it for something that isn't decorative, you know. So anyway, there's some tips on your tracing. I will get back to work. Alright, she's all traced up using a pencil, which is the best, I think. And what I would recommend you do is you want to make sure that you got everything before you peel this up, because it's a little bit of a pain to go back in. The other thing that you don't want to do, and I've certainly done this, I've left something out of this and totally tooled it, and then was finishing up my tooling and realized I'd left something major out. So at this point you want to make sure that it's good. Also, maybe not so much on this, I might write it somewhere, but whatever this is, you want to write it in the corner. So I will write Roper Wallet on this. It's more important when you're doing a holster like this. You need to know what that is. Let's see, did I do it? Colt 4 3/4 Vaquero. So this is telling me that this will run a Colt 4 3/4 barrel or a Vaquero of the same size. Without that, this is now useless, and I try to do it on everything I make. At the very least, I try to put them in the same file. So what we'll do next is I will verify that everything's been copied, and then I'll peel this up and go get my piece of Herman oak off the rack over here, get it nice and wet, and then we'll draw everything on here. We'll tape it on the leather in a nice piece that's going to work. I'm sure this leather's consistent all the way around, so there's just go into a corner. And anyway, I don't have to tell you, I'll show you. Alright, so here we have our lovely Herman oak leather, and I found a piece right here in the corner. Let me show you. So what could that have been? I don't know, doesn't matter. But I tell you what I do see, I see a pretty straight edge here, and if I have a straight edge, I always use it. So what I'll do is I'm going to line my straight edge up, verifying it's straight. Yes. And then I'll probably grab some fresh tape and tape this off. Before I do though, I'm going to take my sponge, and I just use, my phone is ringing, I just use these sponges that I get off of Amazon, and I'll get this wet and do this whole thing, then tape this down and trace it, and we'll go there. So I'm going to figure out exactly, where's my pen? Whoa, don't do that. Do you see that? These dots I'm leaving by slinging water? That'll probably dry fine, but it might not, and then I can't use that. That's a real drag. What I'll do is I'll figure out exactly where this has got to be, and maybe mark it right there. Mark it right there, and then I'll take my sponge, which is wet, and I'll get this nice and wet. Now I'm not saying those spots will stay forever that I just showed you, but it's possible. You can get this as wet as you want. Now if you're looking to tool this right after you cut it and move to the next phases, then I would get it even more wet than this. I'm probably going to leave it right here. Now I know that I'm going to dye this wallet black, so I'm not concerned about a water spot. I can get by with a water spot on that. And then what I'll do is I'll get fresh tape, because I found this low tack stuff doesn't really like being used more than once. It's funny, it's low tack, so it doesn't hold very well, but then when I peel it up, it'll always pull up the grain. But it's better than most tapes I've used. So make sure you're straight on that straight edge. We'll talk about that in a second. Very dangerous. So when you get this going, and here's what I'm talking about, using the tape on the leather. So wherever this tape is, I probably will not be able to use that leather unless it's for some sort of back piece or some piece that won't show. So I want to get as much tape as I can without covering up my pencil mark. That's looking pretty good. Don't want to, well, I guess it doesn't matter that much, but alright, you do want to make sure you're anchored down. You don't want to be, now this is a great part of leather down here, because I probably will never use this leather, so I don't have to worry about pulling the surface off. Now what we're going to do, I'm going to tell you something I've learned. Let's see if it's handy. I just saw it. This is a stylus I've used for a long time. Nothing wrong with it. But once you squeeze and you're doing all this, this metal part will get to you. And I mean, there's nerves in your fingertips, and I have had my fingers starting to go numb. Let's see if I can find the better one, or a variation thereof. So this is not a stylus, but this is a version of, I have a stylus like this and has the rubber on it. You definitely want that, because it will save your fingers, especially if you think you want to be tooling for the rest of your life. And if you buy a good one, throw this one away, because you will never be able to find the good one, and you'll always use this, and it will be a drag. So let me find the one I want, hopefully. Now I will admit to you that I use magnifiers. I'm sure that you have great eyes, but mine don't. I just want to make sure I'm doing it right, so I magnify. Alright, so the next part is finding the real trick to leathercraft is losing your stuff on a regular basis. So now I've covered up this, then making sure there's nothing underneath. It's always better to cut a piece of leather bigger than to cut it smaller. Just like anything else. You can always cut something down, but you can never add. I always try to make it perfect, which is dangerous, because perfect means that there's no wiggle room, and it doesn't always work being perfect. So if I've got a line, I want to go on the outside of the line, and I am not doing that here. Even when I'm cutting it, so now I've readjusted. Even when I'm cutting it with the blade, I'll always try to cut on the outside of this line, just to give myself a little wiggle room. These are the hardest, because these matter the most, the edges. And I sometimes find this is better, because that way the line is close to me and I can see it better. And then I look at the ruler and make sure it's kind of going the right way all the way down. You also want to make sure you're making hard indentations, because the worst is when you're trying to figure out where the line is when you're cutting. I hate that. Alright, now the good news is we don't have to do the sideline because we cheated. So then the other is your corners. Corners are always tricky. I have a wood sander, a belt sander, and sometimes if my corners don't look just right, I'll hit it with the belt sander. That's dangerous too, of course. See, I made this a little extra long on the side here, and I think I'm going to pay for it because it's not going all the way to the edge. But I will figure that out, I guess, now. Alright, we'll come back. So, I'll just show you a little bit. I mean, there's nothing to really see here. Start with the line and finish the line. So, I'm going to kick it out here. Some lines are easier to do one way than the other. When you have a big piece of leather like this, sometimes you don't have the option, so you just have to make do. So really you're just tracing your outlines, and the key is to stay in the line, because you're not only creasing the leather, you're creasing this template that you've created. And whatever you do wrong here, like that, is not something I like to do. I don't like to go back over. Whatever you do wrong here, you'll be doing wrong on the leather, and you'll be creating a dent in the outline for all your future projects. So just go slow and careful. Maybe not the most fun part of the job, but an important part. And there we go. So I'll finish this out and we'll come back. I think cutting this with a swivel knife is actually easier than drawing it on with this. Now what you want to do is you want to look at, I don't know if the reflection will show, but there's dents where I've drawn in this paper. So you want to look at all your lines and make sure they have dents. And that will tell you that you have indeed drawn everything. You can also flip up and look underneath and see what you've got under there. Check it out. Even though I went over all the things you're supposed to do, this line right here and this leaf, I totally left it out here. So I've got to freehand that. I could do that now or with a knife later. So there's that. I think I'm done. Now we do the reveal. I'm going to zoom out of here. So then we'll peel this tape off as gently as possible, trying to save some leather. Let's see what we get on the bottom piece. It doesn't matter. Nope, didn't work. One day I might find some leather tape that doesn't take the top. That worked. Nice. Just trying to save it. You know you're going to, that one little piece right there, you're going to need it for a holster or something. I don't know if that worked. I think it did. This is probably the most leather I've ever saved using this technique. And then for the big reveal, this is kind of where the fun part starts. So here's our piece of leather. And everything's drawn out, and we have our lines. And so what I'll do next is, my knife's actually in the other room, but I'll cut this out. And what I usually do is I'll cut out around the edges just to get this off this big piece of leather. And I'll roll this up and put this piece of leather up, and then I'll cut this out, and then we'll tool it. So there we go. Can I make the light, make it look better? Here we go. While I have you here, I don't want to make this video about everything, but you have to have a good light for everything. For tooling, I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, I have 5 of these lights. And I have one broken one, which breaks my heart. But it's on a stalk. I can move it around. Not too much, evidently, or the wiring inside will break. But be sure to get yourself a good light. And then maybe in the future I'll do a review on this. But the other thing that I really like is this seat that rolls. I got this off Amazon, and I use it all over the place when I'm sewing and all that good stuff when I'm tooling. So now what I'll do is cut this. I can do this on camera if you want. This is the scariest part, because if you do it wrong, you have to start over. I don't want to start over. I'm only going to do part of this on camera, just to show you. Oh, this is the knife I use. There's got to be something better than this. I put my finger here. I put my finger here and guide with it, and this thing once again pinches right on the nerve of the finger. But it has a nice hook on it, and I can get in. I would say always make sure you have fresh blades. It makes everything so much easier and less frustrating. And be careful. So what I do, I don't know if this is how you do it or not, but I start out from my line that I'm trying to cut, and I always pull towards myself. I don't cut towards myself, I just pull this way. And I'm always sort of looking where the line is going, and that kind of keeps the blade going the right direction. The problem is the light hits the blade casts a shadow, and then sometimes that's a problem. Once again, don't ever put your fingers in the line of the blade, because that thing could go and get you one day. And also, always keep your blade straight up and down. Don't turn it at an angle, or you'll have sides that don't work. They need to be flat, which is something that I tend to. I want to turn it at an angle sometimes. And so now I'm seeing the shadow of my blade. Herman oak is a stiff leather. So when you make, let's say you want to sell this on eBay, you can say it's Herman oak, and if somebody knows what good leather is, they'll go, oh, good leather. So that's one reason to use it. The other reason is it tools really well because of the process. Oh my gosh, it's killing my finger. Because of the process. But it tends to be super stiff. I guess that's why it tools so well. And then usually you don't get it on the first cut and you have to go back through, but be careful not to double cut it. So I'm going to cut all these edges and come back. Okay, so she's all cut out. I will say edges like roundy tips like this are tricky. You can do it with your razor, and with this leather it was so stiff it might end up like this. I actually did use this guy on a couple of other corners. Not pro, probably, but the ones I used this on looked not bad. So I literally just went snip, 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 snip. So I'm going to draw a curve just like on the, I don't usually draw on leather with a pencil, although I see people that do it. So you could do your corner with a single cut. So you could start and go around the corner like that. That is usually, I have to say, the best way to do it. And you'll see if you got cut all the way through, which you didn't. So then you would be very careful and go back in and recut. Now this is not Herman oak. So that's why that was so easy. This is Herman oak. And let me tell you, man, Herman oak is stiff. I worry about my digits. But you can do it here too. It's just a lot stiffer. And you can go back in. The other way I talked about was with my, I bought this thing and never thought I would use it, because I can never find it. Where'd it go? It's right in front of me, of course. So I bought this and never thought I'd use it. I use it quite a bit. Sometimes I use it if I'm cutting out shapes. So on this, I've kind of got it backwards here. I'll start from the cut here. So you could cut your leather this way. It does make a straight line. And I would cut it all the way up to my corner. And then I would get a grip on it and just work my way around it. And I've got to say, man, that's a pretty good corner. I'm happy with that. I think they look okay. I will show you a step that I'm going to do that could have saved it. Let's say if my corners come out not so great. These aren't bad, because I've certainly done bad corners. But I have a sander over here that I got off of Amazon for $100. And what will happen is, you'll figure out how your tooling is going to go. This tooling really does not have an up or down, although I would call this up. So if that's the top, these two guys are going to get glued in here. And then this is going to get glued in here. And then it's going to get stitched. And what you are going to be looking for when we get there is all these edges need to mate. And so to do that, I will try to do it the very best I can here before when I glue it, then stitch it. And then when I'm done, I'm going to take this and put it on that sander and go and sand it. And sometimes when I do, I'll take the corners and just roll up on them. Got to be careful. But then again, I guess you have to be careful with everything. The other thing we're going to do is put a finish on the inside, some back coat, that it'll make it look good and protect it. But before we get to do any of this stuff, now we get to do the thing I really enjoy, which is tooling. So we'll wet this, and I'll say it now. We won't wet the whole thing at one time. We're going to tool. This is not that complicated. If it was super complicated, we'd wet like half of it and tool it and wet the other half. But I think I can do one side in the whole run. So we'll wet it and cut it. Cuts better when it's wet. And then when it's all cut, we're going to wet it again and let it dry back a little bit, and then we're going to tool it and see what we get. I'm going to try to go really intricate on my tooling on this, and I also have a dye idea on this that I'm going to do that I haven't done before that I think should look really cool. We're going to leave all the tooling stuff natural, and then we're going to let's think about our process here. We're going to tool it, and then I'm going to dye everything but the inside black. So all the edges will be black. The insides will all be paintbrushed to black. And then all these leaves will be natural. And then we're going to use white stitching around the edges. Maybe a yellow stitching? An ivory stitching? I don't know. Anyway, that's next. Okay, this is my workbench. This is granite. I got it at a granite shop where they cut granite tops for bathrooms. Oh well, whatever, I guess, you know, tile, cabinets, tops, whatever they cut granite for. This was a slab. The lady gave it to me for $20. If I ever did it again, I didn't own this desk at the time. This is a pretty killer desk that you can't really see. It belonged to this guy. He bought this desk in 1968. He worked at the railroad. He is not alive, but his picture sits here and he watches me carve all my leather because I figure it's his desk. So anyway, you do need a great desk, and this is a good height. This is kind of at my waist, and here's my hands right here. And I have used many mallets. So this is really about making a wallet, right? But if you're going to make a wallet, you're probably going to tool it. So we're going to talk about tooling as well. I've used really heavy mallets, which is good because you can get a really good depth to your punch or your stamp. But the handle on this is short, and this thing will wear you out. So then I ordered a different mallet, Maul, and I ordered this big boy, and guess what? It's too big. It'll wear you out too after pounding on leather for a while. So this thing I've had since I started, and I just bought it. I didn't have a good reason, and it's not heavy. I think it's a number 8 or something, whatever number 8 means. So you don't need a heavy mallet, or at least I don't. So let's talk about this. We're going to take a sponge that has had nothing on it. You don't want a sponge that you use to dye anything, of course, but certainly not something that you've used on anything. So this is my water sponge. Until I accidentally use it for something I'm not supposed to, then I'll have to get another water sponge. I see people do the whole thing. There's no reason for me to wet the whole thing. I'm only going to do a side at a time. And you want to do it in phases because you don't want your leather to dry out in the middle of your work. So one way to go is you can wet this like I'm going to do here, just nice and even. And so now it's dark, as you can see. I would be happy, I'd let it soak in a little bit, and then I'd get on it with my swivel knife, which you can purchase at Springfield. I own a lot of swivel knives. If I show you over here, I have like 4 or 5. This is kind of not an expensive swivel knife, but Kevin over at Springfield said this is what I like, and so I said, well, if it's good enough for Kevin, it's good enough for me. And you can always swap out blades to your preference. This is what I like right now. It gives a little bit of a deep cut, which is good unless you're doing decorative. So if you're really cool and smart, you might have some sort of shop bag holding your piece down while you moved. I haven't done that yet. I'm not sure why. I've got to find my eyes. I'll be right back. So all we're going to do here is cut out our design, and we're going to not cut too much and too little. We're going to keep our blade straight up and down. Oh, by the way, someone's going to complain that my hands are getting in the way. Until they invent an X-ray camera that can see through my hands, I really don't think there's a way to get around that. So this is the best angle at this point in the game. So you want to keep it straight up and down. You don't ever want to turn like this in a cut. It's not good. So I just kind of start at the top and work my way down, and I try to do every cut I can at this angle, and then at some point you're going to have to turn it, and then make sure you have all your cuts. Usually I speed this part up, but it tends to make people upset. So I won't show myself cutting all this, but I'll show you me cutting some of it. So hey, by the way, be aware, this is going to fold right in the middle, right? I broke one of my rules, but it's not close enough to worry about. When you're cutting towards the center of your wallet, don't cut too deep on these cuts, because it's going to bend there. And if you sell it to someone, or somebody loves the wallet, they might have this wallet 10 years, you know. So on the inside cuts right here towards the middle, cut lighter than you would everywhere else. It doesn't matter in the middle as much. So I will cut. Always stay smooth. One thing I'll say is I use the front of the swivel knife to tell the back of the swivel knife where it's going. So if I have a long line or a super straight line, I let the front, well, just what I said, the front will guide the back. Unless you're in a curve, and it doesn't work that way. Also, you want to be as precise as possible, but remember, you're going to come back in here and bevel this stuff. So the beveler can save you occasionally, but don't ever rely on it. That is never a guarantee. And if this is the first time you ever tooled anything, don't worry. Don't tool your wallet for the first time. Go and get yourself some scrap leather and find yourself a design. And what I did is I got little round, those round cup holder things, and a pack of 100. And I tooled the same design over and over and over. I actually took pictures to show myself the progress, and it's kind of astounding when you see where you start and then like a month later where you're at. And the only way to get really good at tooling leather is to tool leather. You just have to keep hitting the leather and keep tooling. And you can't tool any way you want. I know that tooling is art, and I have a theory that there's no mistakes in art, but there are mistakes in classic tooling. This would be a classic style tooling that you might see on a holster or something. And guys have been tooling that stuff. Well, that's debatable how long this has been going on. This kind of, I'm not even going to go to the history, but people expect, they don't even know it. Oh, I think my wife is laughing at me. Are you laughing, babe?
I am.
Am I rambling?
Yeah.
Should I stop talking?
Yeah.
Well, if I stop talking, I don't have a video. So my point is that, yeah, you can do it wrong. I've seen people say on the internet, look at my tooling, what do you think? And I think you need to go learn how to tool, because there are ways to make flowers and ways to bevel and ways to shade and all that stuff. And if you're not doing it right, even just cut deep again. Even the average Joe's going to know whether he knows it or not, because he's seen leather belts. He knows what tooled leather is supposed to look like. Now, if you're going crazy freestyle, then do whatever you want. But okay, well, you get the idea here. I'll finish this up and we'll come back. So this isn't, once again, a tooling instructional video, but I want to talk about curves. Curves. Really all you can do is practice. But I always think, okay, I'm going to do a curve a certain way. Like this. Zoom maybe? So my goal when I'm cutting this, I can't stop. If I stop, probably if I talk, this is not going to come out right. So one thing I do, not saying it's right or wrong, I turn the leather as I cut, and for whatever reason it allows me to not get the blade out of the leather, because it's really hard to get back in and stay in your line, and it allows me to keep cutting, and it gives me good circles. Now when you're doing this, be careful you don't tip that blade over. You got to keep it straight up and down and then work your way out. And there you go. That's not a bad circle, round cut. And then my favorite, of course, are like leaves like this, where it starts here, it doesn't go very far, doesn't crank too far over. And then bingo. Then when you come back down, so what I would do here is flip it around, and I would put my knife right where that ended. That way I don't have a gap between the cuts. But once again, beveling can sometimes solve that problem for you. And then here I can actually turn it and come back in and come back all the way around. And so you'll develop your own style, but that's how I handle turns. Alright everybody, we are now at the tooling bench. This is actually a really great desk that I purchased from a friend of mine. It belonged to his grandfather right here. And he was worked on trains, and he made jewelry at this desk. And so I wanted to have his photo here so he can watch as I tool things, at least in spirit. And this isn't really a tooling video. That's a whole nother deal. I actually have whole videos on that on my channel if you want to check them out. But you are going to want a tool, I would hope. You don't have to, I guess. You can make a plain wallet. That would be fine. And, you know, like I said earlier, I'm doing my own tooling design here. But you could, the tool, the way I'm tooling here applies to the diagram that, or the pattern that came originally with this setup. So, as you can see, I have a lot of tools. But I want to tell you something before we get going. So these are a set of tools you can buy on Springfield. I believe the cost is 25 bucks. And I think I'm going to challenge myself. I'm going to buy this set of tools and then do a pretty intricate design just using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tools here. And I'm here to say that what I'm about to do, you could do with just this set of tools right here. Let's just make sure you have everything you need. Everything here is what I have, except I have like 8 versions of everything you see. So we're going to start out. I already tooled half of this, and you know, when you do something like this, I don't know, you might know exactly what you want to do, but I always kind of play around with where am I going with this, what's it going to become. And so that was kind of the first rev, and I did half of it because I had dinner. That was one key important thing I want to tell you. If you're going to start tooling, be sure you have time to finish, because you can't, I don't really feel like you can go and re-wet the pattern or the leather after the fact, because everything would come back up, or it would come back up quite a bit. So I've got my sponge here that's never touched anything but water, And I'm going to get this nice and wet. Now there's a lot of ways to case leather, and everyone has their theories. I've tried it. You know, there's the glass people and the put it in a bag overnight people, and the you name it. There's multiple ways to do it. I get it wet, a little bit more wet than you would think. I make sure the whole everything I'm going to tool is going to get wet here. And then you're going to let it dry back up to a lighter shade. And that usually happens pretty fast. Some people might say, hey, you didn't get that wet enough. But for me, it always works. And that's it. So now we're going to let this get back up. And while we're doing that, or dry a little bit, this is my main swivel knife. That's what I cut this with, that you already have seen, I guess. And so sometimes I use this for decorative cuts, and sometimes I don't. This is what I believe to be a 1960s swivel knife. I bought multiple sets of stamps online in groups from the 60s because I thought, well, they must be good because they're old. And this is an old blade, and I like that it's long and thick, and for whatever reason, and let me tell you, I own a lot of blades. I own ceramic blades, which sometimes work for me and sometimes really don't. Maybe it's the leather. That's not actually a blade. I use this on my feathers. Where'd all my swivel knives go? Here's another one. This is not a bad swivel knife. It's pretty good. And so I have a lot, but this was recommended to me by Kevin, and that's what I use. It's probably my number one, and then this old one is what I use for deep cuts. So she's come back up a little bit. Some folks might wait a little while before they started hammering on it, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. And I'll preface this by saying I don't have see-through hands, so my hands might get in the way here. I really don't think there's a way around that. So one thing I would say is whatever pattern you are doing, have a copy of it around. Because as you're going around corners and doing things, you might think, is that supposed to be beveled or not? Is that an inside? Will that be the background? Will it be the foreground? You can always refer to your image. The other thing I'll say about a beveler is you can use this beveler to make as long a bevel or short a bevel as you want. So if you're beveling in and you're coming in on something and you don't want to cross over, say, into a flower petal or something, as you're beveling this way, nice and flat, when you get to the part that you don't want to bevel into, you can kick that tool up and do your best to stay off that piece that you don't want to touch. Now, right there, I will touch it. But there are times where you don't want to have that beveler slamming into some other design. You don't want your bevel to kick into this vine or this stem going into this flower, right? So you want to be super careful when you start out, and maybe even move up just a hair. Stay out of that. So this would be the same thing. How would I do this? I might go here first and then come on up this way, starting lightly. You don't. I mean, you could have a huge bevel at the start, but it's more natural, I think, to start lightly and then get heavy as you go up. Of course, it's all up to you, or your favorite style, or your favorite person that tools leather. So I'm holding on lightly to the stamp to allow it to move, but it can also jump out of the cut that way, so it's kind of a balancing act. And I'm just hitting and letting the tool kind of move up on its own. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes your leather will be so wet and thick you've got to move it yourself. Okay, the beveling on this side is done. Not my favorite thing, I have to say. It's kind of a job to me, although I do strive every time I do it to make it right. The next part, you kind of get to pick. What do you want to do? In fact, you could do this in a different order, but I think usually what I do next is I go in and pear shade with a pear shader. So I'm just going to go and find things like this and this and this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and I'm going to go in and do it the best way that I know how. So like right here. What you don't want to do, this one's, I'm a little big on this, so I'm going to grab a smaller one, and that kind of depends on what you're tooling. You don't want to ever pear shade all the way to the edge. You always want to leave leather up on each side of your pear shading. So I'll really, and I sometimes mess it up. Now you might even want it to be like that and use the pointy end to get out on that tip. Always kick it up. You could go flat, I guess, but I always kick up, and when you kick up it allows you to move. So I'm going to start here, and then I'm going to turn it. And then I'm going to go down. Now you could stop there, or you could go down farther like that. And that is kind of essentially what you're going to do all over the place on these leaves. So like on this leaf, I'll go to the fat side of this, and I'll make sure that I'm leaving myself a nice edge over here and in the front. And then I'm gonna tip it up. And then if you're super cool, see that? I don't like that because it's not roundy. And I think it should be kind of round. You could even put the little one down and get in with the big one now that you've got the front out, the little tip right here. And drive it home. It's burnishing nice. And then over here the same way. Is it big enough? I think it's too big. I'm going to go with the little one. And so, man, that's a good one. So this is a great example of pear shading. You've got a nice edge right here. It's all the way around. It fits the spot perfectly, and it makes that leaf pop. So then on a leaf like this, you're going to have to think about what you want to do. There's a couple of ways that people handle something like this. The first thing I would say is you want to get a veiner, and I'll try to find one that's probably similar to what you might have. And you're going to start out at the bottom. Now the first question you want to have is, which way do I want my veiner? Which side do I want it on? This side or this side? I'm going to go on the shaded side. And then what you're going to do is you're going to start here and make sure it's always living in the cut, and you're going to go up the cut. And as you do, this will slightly turn as the line turns. So I'll start light and small, and I'm going to, and you can barely see it actually. All right. And I'm going to keep it nice and tight. And I'm going up, and I'm starting to turn it, and I'm starting to make it go out a little farther. And keeping it tight together because I think it looks better. Going out a little farther, and then at the end, you're going to taper it in just a little bit. And so now you have this side. Now the other side, you could do a couple of things. You could pear shade this right here. You could have pear shade that over there first. Or you could make a decorative cut. And I think I might do a decorative cut on this guy. I found this on the internet, and I just think it's pretty amazing work. So I was like, I want to look at this while I'm tooling, so let's look at their flower or their leaf. So they've done one on each side on this leaf, and that looks great. And they also pear shaded the tips, but not right here, and they put a decorative cut in. So once again, you can do whatever you want. I think what I'm going to do now is probably pear shade this side, and then I'm going to go back up the other side like they did just to get more stamp. And then maybe I should have done this beforehand, but I could do a little bit of a pear right here. Oh yeah. I liked it a lot. So there you go. That's kind of how these two intertwine. Now, if you wanted to, you could leave that alone, but I'm going to go back with this guy. Now, the veiner, which by the way, I keep my tools out on in front of me and around me, and that way I can go back to the one I had so I can find it easily. So what I'm going to do is mimic exactly in the same spot on this side. This shader isn't great. I'm sorry, this veiner isn't great, so you have to really whack it, which is could be dangerous for you because you could fall out of your slot or overlap or something like that. And I'm trying to mimic where I am on the other side, but I believe I'm not going to be able to do that anymore because of the big gap here. So I'm going to just keep my own. This side's going to have its own rhythm of distances, if that makes sense. Okay, so now it's on each side. It's more intricate, which is kind of what I was going for here. And then we need to pear shade the rest. Now, she's getting dry at this point. There's nothing I can do. I'm not going to go and wet it. I just need to work. So I'm going to get this guy. And maybe go down. And then I think for this I'm going to do one hard hammer to mimic the shape of the interior. I like that. I want to say, if it's not perfect, if you're like, oh, I messed it up, you didn't really mess it up. I've almost never tooled something and given up. Well, I've never given up, but I've thought, oh, this isn't going to work, but I'm going to keep going. And by the end, it always seems to work. I've never finished a piece and thought, ah, that's terrible. And then, you know, maybe that's me. But I've never had anyone say, boy, that's terrible, Jim. You know, they always are like, it's so beautiful. So you will be your worst critic. Just keep hammering away. At the very least, you'll learn. So I'm going to go all the way into this cut right here and try not to get to the edge. Sweep it around a little bit, then come in the middle, not all the way to the edge, and come straight down. So that's what I'm looking for right there, where I have a raised part in the middle, making it look more like a petal. And then over here is tricky because I've run out of room, but I'm going to give it a little bit. And that actually looks pretty good. So that's cool. What do we have left here? We have this. So let's go here. I'm going to switch up. Now, if you only had one tool or one tool set, you could use your veiner on this guy and walk it all the way up. And I'm looking to see if I have anything better. And I don't, so I'm going to go ahead and use the veiner. So what you want to do is you want to start at the bottom, and just like inside that leaf, you want, well, there's a theory here, and that's that this veiner is going to point towards the center of that coil right there. So I'm going to work it all the way. So here we go. This is one of my favorite things to do. I just think it looks so good when you're done. Trying to stay in the cut, trying to stay tight too, because tight looks good. There's many tools you can do this with, and they all, so we're turning it very slightly, they all make this thing look good. And the real goal for me is to take the edge and to keep it from being smooth, you know, like some sort of shell. Now there's a whole history where this style, you might say, why do people do floral? It isn't, oh, look at that. I didn't see it. I should have. So we have a cut right here. So these have to follow the next line moving up. So I'm actually going to have to jump into the leather a little bit, being aware of where my tip is pointing. Alright, so we're back in the right spot. And we're coiling around. But all of the stuff that you see in Western tooling is based on leather craft from hundreds and hundreds of years ago, which I should do a whole piece on because it's pretty interesting. I don't feel prepared enough to talk on it right now. But my question was, why does a cowboy or Western gear have flowers all over it? And one of the things I've been trying to do is make a less flowery floral design so it's a little more manly. This thing is kind of part way there. It doesn't have giant sunflowers on it or anything too girly, because you want, this wallet is probably going to be carried by a dude and you want him to feel good about it. So I want to tool in a way that's kind of manly. And when I make something for a lady, I make it a little more flowery. Maybe that's not appropriate these days, I don't know. Alright, I probably should have stopped one more back, but since I didn't, I'm going to go one more forward and turn it all the way. Alright, now at this point you can figure out what you want in the middle. Usually you'll cut it, but I'm running a little low on time, and I think this probably wants me to add a little more on here to give a little more depth. So it made this turn. Boy, I don't know. I'm going to give it a try though.
I need you to bang your hammer that way.
That's my wife being funny. She doesn't know I'm talking to my people. So that looks pretty cool. It gives it dimension and makes it look a little less like leather and a little more like a flower. And then you want it to go to get this leather all the way down where it meets this leaf to give it the right, to make it look real. Or more real. You know, I don't know how real I am. Okay. So let's look at the inside of these flowers real quick. I want something big. I want one big seed pod. Just one big round piece right here. I would love to have something bigger, but I don't think I have anything. So I'm going to go in at an angle. I'm not going to go straight in. I'm going to try to give it more depth by going in at an angle. And then I've got one over here. And one here. That one looks really good. I felt like there's one more, but there's not. And this would not be in a basic kit, but this is something I don't even know where I found it. Sometimes you just have to get on the internet and go hunting and looking at stamps. This would look great coming off of that right there. Always lining things up. Looks awesome. Also, you got to think about, if you're going to antique this, what would catch the antique and make it look even better. And that's another great reason to hammer hard, so that your antique will actually have some lines to get into. That one's a little small. Okay, so what do we have? I'll show you another cheater. I don't know if they still make this or not. This is a horse or a mule's foot a multiple mule's foot. So if you have a line that's going straight down like this, instead of using the mule's foot, you can use this guy with one good hit. And I think it looks great. Now, let's say you don't have this, but you do have mule's foot, and that's what that is, singular. You would take it and angle it, and it's tricky because it's hard to get it exactly where you want it. And maybe you think that looks better, because it might. Or we can go back to the cheater mode. Love it. One more. Then we're going to get out the knife. Okay. I'm feeling good about everything. This is my 1960 swivel blade. You will find one that you love too. You just have to play around a little bit and spend a little bit of money. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You can spend. You can find these that are cheap, and you can find these that are old. And so this is probably the hardest part, because you really have to commit to this, especially after all the work you just did. And when I say commit, you do have to get that blade in there. So practice, practice, practice. So like in a little piece like this, get the light on there. You're going to kind of want to mimic the edge. What happened to my leather? So you're going to want to get in here and come down, and then maybe come down again. And the thing you really don't ever want to do is angle your blade, because it turns into you shaving the leather. So like on this, I'm just going to follow the curve of this line, and I'm going to stop. And if you stop hard enough, the stop will turn into a point, and then I might make a short point and a short point, and then I might come around like this to mimic the curve. And once again, that's going to catch your antiquing, and it's going to stay in that crack. So like on this leaf, excuse me, on this flower, there's a lot of ways you could do it, but I'm just going to do an outline with the swivel knife. So I've outlined that. That looks great. I'm going to do a curve and come down and get me another point. If you can see how it's coming to a point here. And then this is a long piece. I'm just going to come straight in here and turn just a hair. And then on this guy, these are super tricky. These are the trickiest because I never know if I'm doing it right until I'm done. So I'm just going to get in here and cut and turn, and keeping that blade up and down, cut and turn. Now we're starting to get more room to cut and turn. Cutting and kicking it at the end to get the point. Following the line of the design, just giving everything more depth and making it look a little more realistic. Here's something we missed. So this camouflage tool is a great piece to use right here, and I'm just going to do that real quick while I see it. And I'm going to get it in the line. And then we have this leaf. You could leave that totally alone if you want, or turning and cutting, following the line, coming down a little bit to give it some depth. And then we have the flower. I'm going to leave her alone. We have this stem right here, and I'm going to do my points on it. I see this. I'm going to go around the edge, points, points. And now it looks like a real tooled piece of leather. Once again, it might look sort of easy right now, but it is not. maybe the hardest thing. So I see one more of these flower, well, maybe that's a leaf. I believe that is a leaf, so I'm just gonna give it a cut. Following the outlines, and it's done. The only thing I might do here is I see this blank spot right here, and I'll bring that cheater mule's foot out because it'll take up the whole area and fit perfect. And that is a half-tooled piece of leather, which I'm happy with. Alright, moving on. Well, I've finished tooling everything, as you can see. One thing I did, and I only bring this up so you don't do the same thing, if you actually like to put your stamp on stuff that you tool, it's always a good idea to kind of build this into your template, and that way you'll never forget to put your stamp on your own work. So I 100% do not have a place to put a stamp on my own work. I did have a couple of other stamps made for smaller things, like this has my URL on it, billyhale.com, and then I had a smaller stamp made, but really there's nowhere to go here, so this will not be Billy Hale branded. And you would think, well, that doesn't matter, right? I've actually had people buy these on eBay and be really upset that it didn't have my stamp on it, like really upset. So just something to be aware of. If you build it into your pattern before you get to this end of the process, you'll never forget. So what's next? Next is kind of fun. What we're going to do next is we're going to get out the die and the antique, and we're going to get this top surface done, and then I'm going to show you what I do to the rough side to prepare it to be a part of the wallet. I think it looks good, and it's protective. And so here we go. Let's we'll prep my area, and we'll get over here and we'll get to dyeing on this thing. Okay, so let's say you've brought it to this point. You'd have to finish it somehow, and there's a few ways you could do this. I'm just going to talk about a few ways that are simple, and then I'm going to actually do it the way that I've envisioned this piece. So a very simple way is to get some neat's foot oil and just cover this with it. And it may come out initially look splotchy to you. Just let it sit, and this stuff usually will all go to one color. Doesn't really turn your leather too brown. It's a little bit lighter, and in fact what I've done and what I would urge you to do is take a piece of leather and put neat's foot on it. Take a piece of leather, put black dye or some of your browns, and I have leather samples that when I'm not sure what I want to do, I pull these out. Luckily I happen to have them handy. So these are the roundies that I taught myself to tool leather on. This has got to be, see there's two circles right here. This is the second attempt of me trying to tool leather. Wonder if number 1 is on here somewhere. I'm sure it would be easy to find number 1 because it will look horrible. Like, I'm sure that was my first attempt at tooling. So from that to that, you can do it. I did it, you can do it. And so anyway, I had all these things and I thought, what can I do with these? I kept them all. And so then I started, this says Phoebe's Saddle Tan. So this is what Saddle Tan Brown looks like. And this is Phoebe's Tan. And it's darker. And light brown. And it's a little less dark than the one before. This is EcoFlow all-in-one. So let's see if I have neat's foot in here so we can look at that. Leather stained golden oak. I know I had a neat's foot in here, but maybe it's gone. Saddle tan oil. Anyway, so what you can do is get yourself some samples like this and then use whatever you have. I have a lot of dye, and that way you'll know ahead of time what you're going to get, because and some leather acts a little bit different, but it gives you a good idea. So the very simplest way to treat this would be with your neat's foot oil. Another way would be to, let's see where she is. This was what I used a lot. It's bag coat, and this is bag coat's what I'm going to use on the inside, but it's not how I'm going to do this one. So we're going to get a little ornate here. I'm just curious what it's going to look like. I'm going to antique the tooling and not dye the tooling at all, because I find once I put on, I'm going to use EcoFlow on here, but once I put on a sealant and then antique it, it turns tan enough for me. In fact, it's my favorite color. But the other thing I'm going to do is on the background, and then everything else is going to go black. So the tooling is the only thing that's going to stay a natural color, and then everything else will go black with black. Where is it? I'll bring it out when it's time. I have black antique paste to stay in the black motif. So starting out here, we just went to advanced on you, by the way, but we could do this. We could take this Q-tip and we could go over all of these pieces that are not going to be turned black. And the reason you would do that first is because if you got any black dye on it, you might be able to quickly wipe it off before it absorbed into the leather. I'll give you a 50-50 chance on that. I'm not going to do that though. I'm going to do it the way I've always done it, which is I use paintbrushes, and this has been cut down into a point. And I'm going to take this paintbrush and I'm going to take that black ink or black dye, and I'm going to go into all the inside background pieces here and very carefully apply it there. And then I'll probably use something bigger and get my black ink all around these solid parts. And that will be our dyeing process. So I'll start out, and I don't know if I'll show myself doing the whole thing, but oh, by the way, you definitely want paper, because you're probably going to get ink somewhere you don't mean to. And so always, this is butcher paper. And you also want gloves, unless you want your hands to have black ink on them. So these are disposable. You can buy them in a pack. I bought one pack and have not used them all up yet. And they will allow you to work on your leather and then go out to dinner with people and not look like a crazy person. Which I've done many times. Dye on my hands. Also, these don't really impede the feel. I had some thicker gloves that I used to use, but they really seem to mess me up. So then I'm going to put my eyes on to get in there. Now, I don't know if so this paintbrush, I always use it with black. I never clean it. I'm not sure why this dye doesn't require that, but it doesn't. So this brush does not care that it's never been cleaned. It acts the same way every time. And I've got to tell you, I always use Phoebines, because I know that dye is never going to act funny if somebody were to, it's not like I took a wallet and put it in the rain, but if you were going to do that, you would want to do that with Phoebines dye. I think it's the best dye out there that you can get in a lot of different colors. So always being careful. The other thing I'm going to say is when you're using a paintbrush to apply a dye, you have to be so careful. It will flick and flick the dye across things you don't want ink on, and dye on. And while I'm saying this to you and I'm aware of it, and it's a bit, I'll do it anyway, it will happen. So I'm going to dip my brush into the dye, and then what you can do on a backgrounded piece like this is, well, I should make sure you can see it. So what you can do on a backgrounded piece like this is you can drop your brush into the background, and oh, look at that, it just popped ink all over the place. So you can get it in and stay in the line because it's cut and tooled. So it's a little easier than you think. The real trick is to keep it from flicking onto other parts. Now you're going to antique this with black, so even if you do mess up a little bit, it's not going to be that outstanding of a problem, because your antique is also going to be on some of your parts, and it tends to hide any mistakes, except for a major mistake. You can't make a major mistake. So I'm just going to do this for a while. Okay, so I'm coming to the end here, and I have to say that this little brush, which I've used 1,000 times, has flicked little black spots all over the place, and maybe you cannot see it. That is my hope. When you background, the dye will stay in that background area. But like on these outer edges, there is no background. No backgrounder. I didn't stamp it with a backgrounder. So it's just leather and then your tooling. And sometimes if you get too heavy with what you have on your brush, it will bleed into parts you don't want it to bleed into. So what I'm doing is I'm going on the outside of the design with that very heavy brush full of dye and letting that dye using it over here, and then when it's time to get into the detail, my brush has less dye and is more delicate in the application, and there's not as much dye just coming off the brush onto the leather. And so I'm sweeping it like this, and you're probably going to have to come back in a couple of times on these big expanses of leather to get the color that you want. I'm looking at pieces that I might have forgotten, like right here. And you are going to antique it, but don't think your antique is going to act like black dye. The reason I'm using black dye on the inside here is because the antique just won't make it as heavy or as dark. So I want to guarantee that it's going to stay dark on the inside of this design and look really good. Really, what you're going for is the pop of the tooled leather against the black dyed leather. And one trick to keep from having these little spots pop off your brush is by going the same direction, which of course I don't always follow that rule, but that is how you do it. Also, just being very careful and not making fast brush strokes or anything like that. Okay, for this next phase, you're going to need some sort of a sealant / sheen. So once again, I'm using that. I keep a bucket full of sponges that I use, and I don't see anything here that's clean enough, so I'm going to get a new sponge, and I'm going to take it and cut this sponge in half, but you don't need a whole sponge. Throw that back where it came from, and then I'm going to take this and simply, it's hard to do this wrong, I'm just going to put this on the sponge. Oops. And it's kind of milky. And then I'm just going to wipe that on. Now, I need more, I can see. The part you really want to get, and I guess I need to order some more sheen, is right here in the tooled part. You want it to get in all those cracks and crevices. And I have found that you can let it look milky like that. It doesn't care. When it dries, it'll still look good. Then we'll hit the other side. And that is an appropriate way to put it on for me anyway. It can be frothy and milky, especially when you're getting it in there like this. That's a good sign that it's going into the nooks and crannies. This is going to protect it from moisture. Now, this isn't waterproofing by any means, but it is a protectant. And I have found that there is a limit to how many coats of this particular type of stuff you can put on there. So that looks pretty good to me. So at this point you could leave it right here, or if I can lay hands on a blow dryer, which may have been borrowed by a teenager. I believe it's gone actually. So what we'll do is we'll let this dry so it's dry to the touch. Now, when I started out, I know many people were like, let it dry for 90 hours and then look at it for 10. I don't do that. I let it dry till it feels dry to me, and then I'm going to hit it again. This is almost gone, my sheen, but luckily I have another bottle under here. Well, everyone, I was editing my video and I got to the part where I antique my leather, and I realized that I must have hit the wrong button because I obviously did not record the antiquing. So what I did for you, because I literally had an email, or it was from Facebook, somebody said, how do you make your carving pop? And I know what they're talking about. They're talking about how do you get the lines and all that to stand out, and you do that with antiquing. So I found this piece of scrap leather and I went over and tooled it a little bit for you and put some nice cuts in there, so hopefully the antique will grab it. And I've taken it all the way to the process in the video where we were at with my wallet, and now we're going to use this. It is Phoebe's black. I like black a lot. There's also a dark brown. The dark brown is pretty black to me, but if it's a black edge, then I always go with the black antiquing. And if it's brown, I go with brown. So I get it on my sponge, and I guess you could use a paper towel or whatever, but I find the sponge works great. And then I simply rub it around. Now, don't be afraid. And remember, we've already put that coat on there to protect it. So if you didn't do that, and you could use antique on raw leather, it's just going to make your leather a darker color. And sometimes that's cool. So like if you're going for some kind of 1880s worn look, give it a try. Do it on a test piece of leather and see how you like it. I have done it for people and they loved it. So all I'm doing is making sure it's in all the cracks and crevices. And some people let it dry, but you don't really let antique dry. You keep yourself some paper towels handy. And I would say keep a roll out here. And then you rub it. Now what you don't want to do is rub it out of the nooks and crannies. You simply want to rub it off the top, and also get any excess off of the black part of the leather. And we're going to go here. You only antique it once. Now you could hit it again, like if you thought, oh, I didn't get in this nook or cranny. You can always go back in. There's no reason you can't. And then wipe it back off. Now what I will do is that after I wipe it down, and the way you can tell is you can look at your paper towel and say, ah, there's still black coming off. And so refold it and get a fresh paper towel and then rub it. And what you're trying to do is get this leather back to that color that you were looking for originally. And also, we're about to jump back into the original wallet. When you put your sheen or your bag coat, whatever you put on top, that will also pull some of this excess off. Sometimes too much for me, actually. So that's why I make sure I get it in all those nooks and crannies. That is the simple way to antique your tooled leather, and it will make it pop. As you're about to see, the wallet came out stupendous. So let's jump into there. Alright, so we're going to go in with the blow dryer and dry this second coat. So it looks great and it's coated, and now what are we going to do? We're going to hit it with our EcoFlow one more time. Well, actually 2 more times. And this may bring some of the antique out of the cracks. You'll see it on your sponge. And it's kind of limiting for what the sponge is. So now we've entered a place where we're getting the kind of a milky look more than I like. So there's your sponge. It's kind of picking up some of that antique. So I'm going to hit it with a blow dryer and see what we get. What we don't want is to leave weird lines on the leather. I already think that's too much. I'm going to take the other half of that sponge and I'm just going to get some of this excess off and move it around. Just because that was a lot. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to hit it with a blow dryer just to dry it real quick. And I'm seeing some excess down here that I don't like. And you know what? it's going to be different maybe on everything you do. It just depends on how you do it, how much you put on. So that's dry and that looks good, and what you're doing there is you're sealing in your antique into those cracks and crevices. I'm actually using this on a warm setting. I'm going to warm it up. I'm going to hit it one more time and then we're going to put one more clear coat on it. Then I'm going to go with this bag coat, and I'm going to use this on the inside. It'll give it a good color and it'll also protect it. And then I'll get some bag coat on here. And this, some leather really soaks it up, so it will take quite a bit. And you just want to protect the back of this piece, give it some color. The only thing you're really going to see is kind of in the middle. But I do this on the inside of all my holsters. And bag coat is something you should probably have in the shop. So if you don't have any bag coat, you should have some around. You will need it. I'll probably put a little more in the middle here. Now I've seen bag coat that actually has a color. On the internet, I've never seen it in real life though. I've never been able to get my hands on it. It would be pretty awesome if I had this in like a light tan and a brown and something like that. Then I'm going to look on the back and make sure we did not get any on the front. Or I'm going to look on the front and make sure my hands are clean. And so you would let this dry. I'm going to hit it with the That's a pretty thick coat. So what I'm going to do is let this dry, and then we're going to actually get to the main phase of this. We're going to put our inserts into our wallet, and I'm going to glue these in, and then we're going to sew it in, and then we're going to be done. Will be amazing. Alright, let's come back after this dries. Okay, so it's pretty dry. In fact, sometimes it's not bad to let it stay a little just slightly moist to get a good bend on your leather here for what you're going to do. Also, I would say, I'm looking like I'm not having any trouble here. Get some light on this. But where your bend is for your wallet or whatever it is, and where your cut is right here, you definitely want to look at that and make sure everything's okay. Make sure you don't have any leather that's just full on exposed where there's nothing in that cut. Sometimes when you bend it like this, it'll open it up. Also, you might bend it like this and find out you cut this too much and it's too thin. And then I've done it on holsters where these cuts right here on the bend were too much and I just didn't feel comfortable. So at that point I either lined it or scrapped it and started over. That's why when you do your cutting on these edges, you cut lighter than when you cut in the main part. But everything here, thankfully, looks good. And so what we're going to do is take our Springfield Leather inserts and properly figure out where they're going to live. So like I said, the stitching part goes on the inside. So here's a stitched interior. We're just going to lay these in, take a look. Is that right? This is, okay, this is going to go over here on the right. Okay, one more thing I'll say before you get too locked down here is if you have a top and a bottom on your front, make sure that you have it the right way when you stitch this in. I've also stitched interiors in upside down. That's not a good thing to do. This really doesn't have a top or a bottom. Either way is fine. I'm going to call that the top. So we're going to lay it down like this. We're going to put this in here, and we're just going to get a visual. We're going to put this in here, we're going to put that in there, and that in there. And so that, let's take a look on how everything's lining up. That is your finished product. Okay, I've verified the very top of my leather is just slightly too long. And it's so slight that I don't think cutting it will work. So what I'm going to do is kind of dangerous. I'm going to put it on a belt grinder, and I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to get the belt grinder going, and I'm just going to lay it on top, and we'll see if it works. Yikes. Okay, here's the plan. I'm going to take this belt grinder that I do use this for this very thing, but not usually at this point in the game. I'm going to take this guy, put it on here, and I'm going to sand it, then take a look at it again and try to get it just right. This is a little bit dangerous. I'm going to do the other side. Okay, after getting it on the sander and really making sure everything's lined up on both pieces on both sides, I'm pretty close. I'm not sure if I would call it perfect, but what I'll do is I'll glue this in. This side is perfect. I'll glue this in, these pieces, and you'll see how our bag coated center looks nice in there. And we're going to get these as close to the edge as possible. It's better to get a little out on the edge than get a little in on the edge. If it's a little out after you sew it, you can then grind it on that grinder, or sand it and sand it in. But if it's too far inside, you cannot sand it out. That's impossible. So we're going to line these guys up, and then we're going to figure out a safe distance for stitching, which is probably going to be super close to this, because don't forget, after this we have to edge it, and edging takes a part of that edge off, hence the word edging, of course. And so that's it. I guess what I'll do now is grab my glue, and like I say in the instructions, they recommend basting tape, and I could use that, but I never have. It was never something I ever used. So next we'll get our glue and get going on that. So the trick here is to make sure you glue in the right parts and not the wrong parts. So the only thing open on this is this piece right here. Everything else will have stitches. So we'll throw some glue along the edges here. And what you want to do is stay pretty close to the edge, so that you don't glue down parts that you're going to want to have access to in the future. Now I gotta say, this glue is pretty great. This is leather glue, and it will hold long enough to get your stitches going, and if you need to get in there and let it go after you're done, you can also pry it loose that way. So it's all that to say, it's not bad to work with. It dries pretty quick. And I need to add some more to the top. And see, it's already drying. So that's kind of a sparing amount. Now we want to get it right on the piece. So I'm going to line up this edge, making sure the bottom's straight. Making sure it's all the way out on that edge, even more out than it needs to be, possibly. Making sure it's straight everywhere. Making sure I'm not getting any glue where I don't need to get it. This side is just a little long, and I need to keep that in mind when I'm laying down my stitching. Alright, so let's see. I feel good here at the top. I feel good on the back. Feel pretty good on here. Like I said, it's a little long, but I'm going to take that into consideration. I think what I'll do is go ahead and just make sure this thing's on right. I could put the other piece on, but I think that would be not a good idea right now. So I made these. Of course, you can buy the little clips on Amazon, and then I've glued leather pieces on the inside. The leather piece is so you don't dent your tooling, because I have had things like this. I put them on and then I realized that I've dented my leather on the outside, which I don't want. I'm pushing this out a little bit, and you can see my lip right here where the leather's showing through. You don't really want that, but I'm going to live with it right now. I'll put this here. I'm going to look on the edge and make sure it's all the way out. It's boy, just about perfect out here. You're to the point now where if you mess up, you're going to mess up everything. So we'll get this clip on here and this clip on here. It's a little excessive, the clips. And grab another. But it's better to be excessive. Alright. Whoops, look at that. There's no leather on the inside here, so we'll make sure it's over there. Okay, so that'll dry nicely, and then we'll get on this side with this piece. This piece seems to be thicker. I like it better. Now you could of course use the glue dispenser. I like doing it this way too. Same thing, close to the edge. I tell you what, you don't want to get it too close, then you have glue coming out of your edges, and that's not cool. But you can take your finger, it's just like Elmer's glue, but you could take your finger and roll this off your leather if you had to. But you don't want to have to do that. And if you get too much, you can always move it around a little bit. And that's a little thick on that back edge. And that's too close to the edge right here. So I'd take my finger. Oh, look at that. I got it on my piece. But this glue is pretty forgiving. Like I say, you can take your finger and make it right. Alright, that's fine. We're going to lay this in. And getting all the glue off my hand before I start touching things. Alright. So we're going to line up this back edge. This side seems to be pretty close to perfect. I'm not sure what that means. I don't know if that means I cut it wrong. Didn't cut it just right, but that could very well mean that. Alright, so let's take a look on our edges, and then let's take a look here. Once again, better to stick out a little bit than to be in too much. Alright, and I'm going to use my fingers to push on all the corners to make everything right, and then I'm going to grab some more clips. Then next we'll come in. I've run out of nice clips. Well, that's a drag. Then we'll come in and glue those top pieces on too. Here's one. And look at that. Even here I've got leather showing at the top. So another way to go about this would be, before we sew it, go in and grind this right. Grind this so everything's perfect. We'll see. We'll leave this here for now. We'll come back and we'll move on. Okay, so this usually dries pretty quick, and I've waited an appropriate amount of time, keeping my clips nearby for the next phase. Making sure all my stitches were pointing the right direction. Inside. So now we're going to take our other two pieces and glue those on like this. So it's the same procedure. Get my little Q-tip, get some glue on it, and the only place there'll be glue here is down here and here. So we're going to make an L shape of glue, being super careful, maybe just making dots on this one. It's pretty light application of glue, but it'll probably do. Alright. Put this back over here. Now we're going to be very careful not to get glue where we don't want it. Lining up our bottom corner. Lining up our side. Everything looks good. So I'll do a clip on the bottom. Pushing it out a little bit. With my theory of it's better to have it out than in. Making sure it's good here. I like it. Going up top. Well, no, we'll go in the middle so we don't create some sort of weird wrinkle. And then making sure we like it and clipped. Okay, so that side's done. And then we'll go over on this side, do the same thing. So this is actually that inside pocket material for your credit cards. I've run one of these interior kits on my personal wallet, and I've really liked it. So we're going to do the dot system again here, I think. And of course the insides of this will be places you could put receipts or money, dollar bills, etc. Alright, we're going to do the same line up here. I'm going to put it in the corner and then use my finger to keep it level, and then use my fingers to try and line it up on the edges and at the top. Uh-oh. I think I have a problem. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and glue this down. I think the other piece did not glue well. Okay, so I'm going to make sure everything's right. Put my clip on. You know, it'd be really cool is if these pieces were pre-sewn, but then I guess you'd have double stitching where you don't need it. Alright, we'll leave this alone. Alright, we're all glued up. Ready to move to the stitching phase. Now at this point in the game, you're going to have to either hand stitch or stitch with a machine. I have a machine, and I'm going to assume many of you do not have machines. So I have a stitching video that I have linked in the description here of this video, and you can go over there and take a look at hand stitching and how that is done. And what we're going to do now is look at the machine. Now, one thing I'm going to tell you to do, whether you're hand stitching or not, is we need to, when you're hand stitching, you can actually go in here and take a look and make sure you're doing it right on the front and the back. When I'm stitching on the machine, I can't see the back while I'm stitching it. So what I'm going to do is take this, and I use this to create lines for myself when I'm stitching. and it gives me an idea of where my stitches are going to live. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So this is a little tight. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll grab a holster I've already made, like this guy, and I'll go look at how far in my stitches are. So this is pretty close, but it's a little bit tight, so I'm going to set it out just a little bit. And then I'm going to go look again here. And so that's about standard for me. So then what I'm going to do is go and look at all of this, and of course this is going to work, and what's going to happen is you'll stitch all the way across these points. But what I need to be careful of and pay attention to is my tooling, and get rid of all this. How far in my stitches are going to be and how close they're going to be to the tooling. So we made it there, we made it there, and by made it I mean that our stitches are not going to get into our tooling. They are going to be very close, but they're not going to get into the tooling. So on the one hand, the closer you stitch that way on the inside of the wallet, the safer you are to make sure you're staying on the back side. You're keeping everything at the right distance. But I like to keep my stitches a little closer to the outside of the edge because that keeps everything tight on the edge. So it's a balancing act, I guess is what I'm going to say. This is pretty good, actually, this place right here. So this doesn't actually create a groove. This just creates a line. So what I'm going to do, and I went too far there, is I'm going to create a line for myself, and then I'm going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to go find that line on the machine. So let's go do that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is look at that line that I made. It just is a slight indentation, nothing crazy. And I'm going to take, this is a Cowboy 3200, great machine, can do lightweight wallets and big holsters and belts and things like that. And then this is a little accessory that allows you to maintain a standard distance from the edge. So I'm going to bring my needle down, and I'm going to try and get into that slot, and then I'm going to lock this roller down, and that's going to guide me around all my edges. So there it is in that slot, and then I'm going to raise my needle up so I don't gouge it, but I'm going to look at where everything's going to be. So I'm going to make sure my needle is here. That actually almost looks a little too close into me. And so what you want to maintain is on the back side that everything is staying not only great on the front, but also is working on the back as well. So the closer I go in here, the more chance I'm going to have of dipping, or getting. I'm not saying it. I've had stitches jump out on me on the back side, and I didn't know it till I was done on a wallets. So we don't want to have that happen. Okay, I'm not going to do a lock stitch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start sewing and go all the way around and come back on top of my 2 stitches, and that's going to be the lock. So this is tricky business, y'all. Once again, another step where you can make a break. I'm going to get my eyes on just so I'm seeing everything better than normal people. Alright, we can only do this once. Alright, we're making sure that I've got my hand over here on the forward and reverse. We're making sure we're in the forward gear. We're down. I tested this on some leather previously. You don't want to test it on your piece that you're in love with. And I'm going to go down. I'm in my line. And I'm going to just hold my string in a tight way so that when it pulls back through for the next stitch, it will pull everything right. And I'm not going to go fast. going to keep it at a nice pace. The corners are going to give you the most problem because you can make it stitch different ways the way you hold it around the corner. Alright, I'm all locked in. I can let go of my 2 stitches. Alright, we're going to come up on this corner. And so I think what I'm going to do is go out a little bit farther. Yep, bring it down and turn and hope everything's going good. Alright, now I'm making a full turn here, and I'm going to hand crank this. Alright, making sure everything's tight against the wheel. I'm using a kind of an ivory stitch instead of white thread just because I think it goes. Okay, now this is very important. On the back side, look at this, the glue's let go here, but on the back side you have your pieces. You want to make sure nothing's curling under as you're coming up on these new pieces here. The scary part is you can't see what's happening underneath. Now this is going to get right on my tooling, it looks like. And I'm going to hold this wheel to control it. It went a little more into the tooling than I thought it would. Alright, it's right on the edge. Alright, we're coming to another corner. Probably get one more stitch in here. I'm going to pull it in a little bit with my hand. That looks dangerous. We'll see in a second. And coming around. Alright, making sure everything's underneath and not curling up. And do hand stitching, like that holster I just showed you. Alright, now the next goal is to line up with this hole, and then we're going to I'll put my hand on the wheel for that, and that'll allow me to stop the machine if I think about it in time. Okay, we should land right in the middle, sort of in the middle, and then we're going to come right into that first stitch, and I'm going to have to wiggle it a little bit, and then we're going to pull our stitches towards us in an effort to not cut them as we go through. And then we're going to go into the previous stitch. Now I think you run the risk of cutting. Okay, we'll go one more then. That's how a machine can get away from you if you're not thinking. Alright, it's on the upstroke. I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to cut it. And then what you want to do, this is the moment of truth, y'all. So what you're hoping happened here is that your stitches stayed in your interior kit and that everything looks right. And I've got to say, so far, it's perfect. They don't always come out perfect. If you're hand stitching, you can see a problem as it happens and then fix it. But if you're machine stitching, not always the case. Oh, I'm very excited. Okay, so you want to take your string on the back side. I'm working with reverse in this camera. You want to take your string on the back side and pull it. And pull the knot that's on top into the middle of the leather, and do the same thing on the other string. And then I keep some handy dandy scissors here. And you're going to cut those. You're going to cut the front. Now for some reason the battery on this thing is always not good. So this is a thread burner, and the problem with the thread burner is that it will discolor your thread. I'm trying to make it so you can see it. So you have to be careful So what we're going to do is melt this thread, the thread ends back into the knot. And it looks good, but it also, I think, helps seal that knot. So I don't think the battery's working. If you do have one of these, one thing I've found is you can unscrew it and just move the battery around. For some reason, that seems to turn it to make it work again. You can also pull the ends out a little bit. So let's find our knots again. Let's see if we can heat it up. Yep, now it's hot. So be careful. This thing seems to be pretty loose, so I'm going to spread this out a little bit. Just so it fits a little tighter in the holes. We'll do the other side, other direction. Oh, it's going the same way. Just locking up these threads. This is one of the first times I've used this ivory thread. I think it looks really good, actually. Alright, and then don't forget the back. Okay. Alright, you would think that we're done, right? Let me zoom out here. You would think that we're done. We've got our stitching, our tooling. I think it looks pretty dang good. We have a wallet. Man, that's pretty hot. But we got to do one more thing. Let's go back to the bench. Okay, so as I approach the bench, I see that my paintbrush is laying dye down on my pad. And if I were to put this over here, I might get that on there. I'm going to throw this back in the brush pile. And then I'm going to wipe this down. Not cool. Something to be aware of. Okay, so you're like, Jim, aren't we done? Man, it looks great. Really, really does. That's the real dang deal right there. But you're not done. Because, my friends, we have to do a part. We're going to edge it. Let's see what number we have here. I believe this is a number 2. I used to use number 3 edgers, but I believe number 2 is better. After all these years, I've switched. So what we're going to do, and I don't really have any tips here, we're going to edge the front and the back, and then, well, let's do that first and we'll talk about next. So I'll probably start on a straightaway, and just being careful that I maintain kind of the same edging all the way. I'm not going, and it's better if you can do it in one go. Try not to fall out. And sometimes you're just going to fall out. Around the corner. Then the straightaway. I'm not sure why this is so hard for me. I've done it on all kinds of things. Sometimes it's easy, I guess. Okay. The harder you push, sometimes the easier it is. So that was a good run. I'm going to make this corner and go back up. Okay, and then we'll do the inside, right? Sometimes I don't do the inside, I got to tell you. This is thin leather. So, if you're just getting started, you might have something like this to add your leather with, and you would take that and you know, do it that way. But I have this wood piece that I had made. Well, I didn't have it made. I bought this on Amazon. And so we're going to do it this way. So there are all kinds of ways to burnish the edge. I wanted to note that I did moisten the edges on this before I went in to burnish it, and sometimes I'll go around and then maybe get them wet again and just keep going until it looks good, like a singular piece of leather on that edge. There are people that are masters at burnishing the edges, and I'm pretty good, or I'm decent, I guess, but I'm always trying to get better at this aspect of the process. And there's so many different ways to do this, and different techniques, and different people use things on the edges. So head over to Springfield and see the options that you can use, from something like this to something that's handheld and anything in between. This is the final stage, but it's important. You know, people definitely look at the edges of your work on your holsters and things like this if they know what they're looking for in a leather piece. All right. So that is the edge. Looks pretty good. And I'm going to show you the next phase. In fact, let's just move over here. We are so close to done. There's only one thing left to do. This is important. I didn't do this for years, and I found this, or I didn't find it, I just bought it. And this is let's take a moment for the train. This is Phoebe's black edge coat, and you can use black or brown. At least I use black or brown. So we're going to go black on this thing. Let me think. Would brown look good? I don't think so. Let's go black. So what I'll do is find my Q-tip that had glue on the end, and then I'll use the other side. I guess I won't get too gluey, right? And I'm going to dip this in here. This is the best way I've found to do this. This is dangerous stuff too, so don't leave it open. I'm going to take my Q-tip and I'm simply going to wipe on the non-dyed areas. And here's what you don't do. Don't get your stitches. Don't be sloppy. This stuff will stay wet, so if you were to touch this with your finger before it dried, it would come off on you. Maybe don't use the thing that you use for the glue, the Q-tip. Maybe that was a bad idea. Q-tips. You don't want too much on this tip, but you want enough to be able to carry it a ways. And if you have extra, you can always move that down the line. Just once again, watch out for your stitching. Watch out for other parts of the wallet that you do not want to have black on. All right, everyone, if you've watched this whole video to the end, then you must really want to make one of these wallets. There's so many nuances, small things that can go wrong, things you should know about. That's why I left all the parts and pieces in. And a lot of videos I do, I think this is too long, but people always say, thank you for showing everything. No one really does that. I have to say, I'm very picky, and I've done many wallets, but I've never done a wallet that looked like this, and I think it came out great. I really love it. And then the ivory stitching came out great. And once again, sometimes when I'm stitching, the back side will not work like the front side, but the back side stitching came out great. The interiors are all in and solid, and it will be a great wallet for somebody. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it helped you. If you have any questions, hit me up. Maybe I can do a reply video if you're like, how did you do this? Or how do I do that? Whatever, it's all good. And once again, Springfield Leather, Interior, Kevin and the whole gang over there, awesome group. I love just watching videos for fun at lunch. So check them out, and that's where you can find this. I'm Billy Hell at billyhell.com. Be sure to hit the subscribe and the like button, and maybe I'll make some more cool full-on videos. Bye!